Good afternoon, everyone. How's it going? Justin Freiberg, Matt and Emerson, any folks in the back, would you like to take your seats? We're going to get started in just a second. Fantastic. Thank you all so much for being here. It's a real pleasure and a treat to have you back for the Yale Cooling Conference. This is the second year that we're hosting it. So those of you who are returning, welcome back to the Yale School of Management. Those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. To all of our friends, colleagues online, welcome, welcome. It's great to have you here with us for the session. My name is Stuart DeCue. I'm the Executive Director of the Yale Center for Business and the Environment. And I think they put up a slide for me. Yeah, look at that. My large face is there. I'm also the inaugural Director of the Planetary Solutions Impact Accelerator between Yale Ventures and Yale Planetary Solutions. We at the Yale Center for Business and Environment love hosting this event because it brings together diverse actors, worlds, an issue of real relevance and importance at a critical time, and it's the role the university should play in convening all of these actors. Our partners at the Carbon Containment Lab, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, Refrigerant Emissions Elimination Forum have put together really a unique group of people and some really stimulating ideas for you all. We hope that we're able to advance action on climate as well as on business resilience. And this is really, critical. Like, these forces converge on this topic, and the people who are working on this are doing some fantastic and interesting work. Like last year's conference, I thought was fascinating. This year's theme on finance and innovation, as you will see, these two interconnected themes woven throughout the day's proceedings. We've packed in a lot here, and we hope to leave you inspired, connected, and motivated to work on solutions yourselves. For us, that means success, but it's innovation happens at the edges of all these disciplines and areas, and where the early stage companies are meeting with the large strategics and corporates here, where people from the financial community are meeting with those who focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. This is where you have a great opportunity, and we're thrilled to be a part of it. So happy to introduce the program for today. And there's three speakers to set the scene, who I'll introduce, two panels, and a special announcement, which is really significant. First, Anastasia O'Rourke will give us the big picture, why cooling is so vital. Everyone know Anastasia? Probably everyone in this room should know Anastasia if you don't already, but yeah. Really a huge credit to Anastasia, who's been a long friend of the Yale Center for Business and the Environment from her time as a PhD student here, but just someone who has kind of a center and force of gravity to bring people together and deeply cares about other people's perspectives. This is not like pantomime or kabuki theater. This is someone who cares about the stakeholder values and views, because bringing them together makes us healthier and more whole. So really thrilled that Anastasia can kick us off. The CC Lab, Carbon Containment Lab advisor Scott Stone will provide a brief overview. Scott, wave, say hello to everybody. On the current policy and U.S. context, how it's been changing, what we want to level set, and what's actually going on. Scott authored the U.S. AIM Act, coined the term Lifecycle Refrigerant Management, has been close to the action for a long, long time, so he's uniquely qualified to give us some perspectives and updates here. Ethan Olam from the Carbon Containment Lab, where are you, Ethan? Around? There we go. I actually had the pleasure of working with Ethan as a student while he was here doing work on a climate tech and clean tech landscape at Yale, and he was a fantastic resource for us. We were thrilled to work with him. He'll provide highlights from the recent analysis of the scale and opportunity to mitigate emissions in the commercial real estate sector. And next we have two panels, one on industry and one on capital. So get your questions ready for those, and we're going to do those all through QR codes so you can submit them all online. We can manage those really effectively, figure out the ones where the most concentration of interest is. And following that, we are excited to hear from 18 innovators providing solutions spanning from lifecycle refrigerant management to advanced cooling technologies. And for those in person, you'll then get a chance to dig in, talk with those folks, and learn more about their ventures at the Snyder Forum just down the corner. One final note. Between the two panels at around 4 p.m., there will be a special announcement of a new major initiative launched today concerning corporate action on super pollutant mitigation. So, coming together today, if you're like me, just coming off the Olympics, I get the feels, I get excited. After the Winter Olympics, you feel like people have come together, done incredible things. And, this is a team sport that you're all bringing together in this as well. One of the favorite quotes from a Winter Olympics movie that I just heard recently was Miracle, which is, from great moments are born from great opportunity. And literally that's the way I felt last year when people came together, that there were conversations amongst industry and policy and academics that you just didn't hear in many other places. And to see that continue and to see the opportunity and what the Carbon Containment Lab and partners have done to do that, thank you for being here. It's a real pleasure. And I'll invite Anastasia up to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. When you do have questions, that's the QR code, and we'll put it up a few times. Great. So thank you, Stu, for the very warm welcome and kind words. It's lovely to be back at Yale University, where I did my PhD. And here we are at Yale, which is an institution that really values learning and really values dialogue, really values sharing different views and listening to each other. So it's particularly kind of a good venue to have these conversations about cooling, and in particular, how can we make this a more sustainable system of cooling? So what I'm going to do is reflect a little bit on what's happening globally on this topic, as well as just think a bit about some of the perspectives we've been bringing from the Carbon Containment Lab. And then this will then move into our more, different speakers that are coming after me. So last year, we really focused in on lifecycle refrigerant management. I'll define that for you in a minute. But we're expanding the frame this year to also include alternative cooling technologies, because we want to think ahead a little bit, and we want to think about what the next generation of technologies and equipment and innovation could be. And really encourage and accelerate, those systems to get put in place and actually make a big difference. So the Carbon Containment Lab, we are a nonprofit. We're based here in New Haven. And we really value learning too, both from others as well as from the field and going out and seeing some of these systems in practice. And we've been really lucky to visit a number of different locations, as you can see in some of the photos here. And we take as kind of a systems view to this, because the cooling sector is very broad and very interconnected and actually quite interesting. So we like bringing different perspectives to this work, both from a sort of investment perspective of what's possible, also from an entrepreneur's perspective, seeing the opportunity set. And we ourselves like to think of ourselves as sort of entrepreneurial, finding things, seeing how we can be helpful. As a relatively small team, we like to get in there and enable others and partner with others and help them as they try to make a difference in the world. And because we're a climate solutions lab, we're very much looking at the cooling sector from the perspective of climate. But of course, there's many other perspectives to bring to this sector as well. And part of the reason we like this sector and thinking about it as a climate solutions zone for impact is that there's a lot of really low cost and actually sometimes cost saving opportunities here. And so this is very tangible and real and very possible in the near term to make a big difference. So that's partly why we like it. And we're very happy to convene and have these discussions today. So just a few words on the cooling sector. We've become better at understanding that cooling's not only a global sector, but very heterogeneous. So, it's across everything. And we really, if you reflect on it and stand back a little bit and think about it, we really rely on these cooling systems in the very fabric of our lives. And, we're cooling ourselves, our spaces, our food, our medicines, and especially in the Western world. However, this is, and it's sort of invisible to us in a way, a little bit like energy. We kind of tend to take it for granted. But access to cooling is really uneven worldwide. And this is going to become more and more apparent as the world warms. So there's a recent University of Oxford study that just estimated that as we reach 2.0 Celsius, climate change increase, temperature increase, about half the world's population will experience extreme heat events, which can be devastating. And it's starting to happen, in fact. So this is, on the one hand, a climate story, but it's also very much of human health and access and equity story as well. So I want to just keep coming back to this and really thinking big picture about what are we all doing here. So the cooling sector, in part because the world's warming, is rapidly expanding. And it's growing particularly in developing countries and in large countries that are rapidly urbanizing and developing. And, we're seeing huge growth rates of air conditioning systems and refrigeration all around the world. So it's kind of a great time to get involved in this sector to try to help bring it on a more sustainable course. And so it's also a massive energy user because of the systems that we use are largely quite energy intensive. And this also then has indirect emissions impact associated with it. And there's some recent data coming out about that as well. So refrigerants themselves, the actual gases, can be called super pollutants if they're released to the atmosphere. Now, that doesn't have to be the case, but unfortunately right now it is quite common practice to either vent these these gases when the equipment's at end of life, or they're slowly leaking over time, as that equipment is installed. And so, but it doesn't have to be that way. And then there is policy, which Scott is going to explain a bit more, through the Montreal Protocol and international agreements around phasing down the high global warming potential gases within the suite of refrigerant gases. And countries have been implementing this over the last 10 years to phase down the production of the high global warming potential gases in a kind of a phased approach so that industry has a chance to come up with alternatives. And that's been quite effective, but what it doesn't do is deal with all the downstream emissions coming out of the existing equipment. So this is where we're excited about Lifecycle refrigerant management, because this is where you can deal with these sort of banks of emissions that they're not yet being emitted, but they could be. And so we need to do things like just inventorying where they are. We have a lot of different types of equipment. And so you can just imagine, say on a campus like Yale, there are a lot of small units everywhere. Just even knowing where these gases are is a step, an important one. Detecting any leaks and then fixing them, and then either recovering those gases as the equipment reaches end of life, or recycling them back into when you're servicing the equipment. And then depending on the value of the gases and what you want to do with them, you could either reclaim them, meaning sort of put them back into use, clean them up and put them back into use, or choose to destroy them. So this is the sort of life cycle refrigerant management concept. And there's a lot of low-cost or even cost-saving opportunities here. So we'll hear more about that when we get into our presentation from Ethan. And in addition to lifecycle refrigerant management, we are excited about the sort of next generation of cooling technologies. We're calling some of these, a subset of these are alternative cooling technologies. There's also a whole realm of equipment that are using still vapor compression system, but much lower or zero global warming potential. And there's a lot of equipment and gas innovation happening. So we wanted to feature some of them today. And, sometimes when you're writing an essay or a story, teachers always used to say, show, don't tell. So partly why we wanted to do the showcase is to show some of the suite of innovation that's happening in both lifecycle refrigerant management as well as alternative cooling technologies. So we're really excited to hear from all these folks who are leading the charge and trying to get this working. So I mentioned that there's already policy in place. There's also a lot of activity in the global arena around cooling and resilience and adaptation to some of these big changes. Here's some on the screen that we're aware of, and there's a lot of different initiatives all around the world on this topic, which is exciting. And just wanted to say, there's the policies and the talks and the initiatives and the pledges are really important, but the practice is just as important. And it's actually, we need to bridge these two worlds and make sure that we're focusing on implementation. And Stu had mentioned that this is industry transitions like these are a team sport. We agree. And we're excited to bring you all together today. And we have a wonderful team at the Carbon Containment Lab. I want to thank all of our team for putting on this event while I have the mic, and all of you all for joining as well. So with that, Scott, come and tell us what's going on in policy land. Thank you.
Thanks, Anastasia, and thanks, Stu, for the very generous introduction. So I'm going to talk about the regulatory, legal, and policy landscape around lifecycle refrigerant management, LRM, and alternative cooling technologies. Let's start with the timeline. This is, going back now 40 years, how we've regulated refrigerant gases. This slide alone could be an entire course here at Yale. Every line on this slide could also probably be an entire course. We're going to focus just on the AIM Act framework rule and its relationship with LRM and ACTs. Very much a US focus, but with a lot of relevance for jurisdictions all around the world. I'll also note, I'm grateful to Stu for that very generous introduction, but all of my work in this space certainly has been part of a much larger and super talented group of people, like Samantha Slater from AHRI, John Hurst from Lennox, now with the Alliance for Responsible Atmospheric Policy, Helen Walter-Terranoni, now with Train, Mike Armstrong, AGAS, and of course, there's one person here who has lived every line on this slide, and that's Kevin Fay, also with the Alliance for Responsible Atmospheric Policy. So a lot of incredible expertise and experience in the room. We regulate refrigerants under the AIM Act in three ways. Upstream is supply. This is the phase down, constricting production and consumption. Midstream is demand. This is the kind of refrigerant you can use in equipment after certain dates, largely done by GWP. And then downstream is where we have LRM. This is leaks from equipment, and then what happens to that gas in equipment when it reaches end of life. Now, there are only climate benefits associated with two of these three categories, upstream and downstream. Upstream, on the supply side, the climate benefits are significant. In the United States alone, the phase down will net around 4.5 billion tons of CO2 equivalent by 2050. And most importantly, that is extremely bankable. This is the Kigali Amendment and AMAC's phase down schedule, and it is enshrined in federal statutory law. It took an act of Congress to create it. It would take an act of Congress to change it. That insulates it from political changes, policy changes, given its broad bipartisan and, most importantly, very active, very vigilant industry support. Now, states certainly can do more, not on the supply side, because no one state could manage national production, but additional GWP limits in the midstream, according to EPA back in the Biden years in 2023, have uncertain and, if any event, limited additional mitigation. Why? Because all you're really doing, given this guaranteed 4.6 billion ton avoidance, with GWP limits in the midstream, you're just allocating where and when those reductions occur. Ultimately, supply will be constricted to a point where you're not going to be able to fill the equipment with whatever you might want to fill it with. And so the reductions really are all credited there to the upstream supply controls. Now, if you want to go beyond that, that's where you've got to turn to LRM. The Montreal Protocol's Technology and Economic Assessment Panel projects around 39 billion tons of CO2 equivalent of additional mitigation opportunity. This is about a year's worth of global greenhouse gas emissions, but a comparable amount of CO2, even if we avoided it tomorrow, would still take hundreds of years for any kind of benefit to show up in the atmosphere. CO2 has an exceptionally long atmospheric life. HFCs, by contrast, have very short atmospheric lifetimes. That means that if we were to get these 39 billion tons tomorrow, you'd start to see a benefit in the atmosphere within about a decade and on for another decade beyond that. So it's climate relief when it's needed the most. But we know that hanging your hat on climate benefits is not going to be a way to pursue from start to finish an effective policy regime. Lots of ample examples out there. And so there are two other, I think, really important attributes around LRM that have broader and more politically viable appeal. This gets into the policy side, but I think is important. And one is national security, one is affordability. These are two sides to the same supply coin, and I think it's pretty obvious. You know, when you have declining supply, if demand persists, this is a pretty smart room, but I don't think you need to be Milton Friedman or John Maynard Keynes to know that misaligning supply and demand means you can see an increase in price. The more you can sustain supply by recovering gas and cleaning it up and reusing it, the more you can keep supply and demand aligned, particularly in these early years of the phase down, given that there's a lot of commercial equipment out there, in particular, that has 20 or longer year lifetimes. National security is related. You know, we make a lot of refrigerants here in the United States, but there's a whole bunch that we don't make in the United States. And of that, some of those are made over only in China. Now, we use refrigerants and F-gases in food production and retail, healthcare, precision manufacturing like semiconductors, and F-gases are used basically in every weapons platform and military installation in the country, in the world. If there were, hypothetically, a disruption in trans-Pacific trade, there are some gases we need and use here that we wouldn't be able to get. And while there are stocks, at some point, those stocks would come under pressure and could be all used up. The more there is infrastructure and capacity and recognition that, you know, these are products, not byproducts, and can be reused, they can outlive the life of the equipment in which they're in, the more you can address vital national security priorities. Now, with all these great rationales, right, climate, national security, affordability, there's got to be a pretty robust regulatory landscape for LRM, right? Well, not so much. And there's some specific reasons for that we're going to get to, but want to just briefly touch on more or less what we've got. This is pretty high-level summary, but under AIM, there's any number of requirements that are relatively new. These only apply to commercial systems, and then under the Clean Air Act, much longer, there's a prohibition on venting. It's been around for 30-plus years. My understanding is if you go around and talk to folks, there's probably single-digit compliance rates in terms of not venting equipment when it's being serviced. And then under Section 608 of the Clean Air Act, we have certification for technicians. And again, not my words. Where's Chuck White? Right? Not my words. Not his words necessarily either, but that 608 certification has not aged well over the past 30 years and is desperately in need of an update if we're really going to get serious about more management. States recently have tried to fill some of the gaps with some innovative ideas. The biggest challenge is, you know, when you have an open market, it's hard for reclaimed refrigerant to compete with virgin refrigerant. Reclaim's a little harder to get a hold of, and on a spot basis can sometimes be more expensive. So creating reclaim-only markets, which is what some of these state initiatives try to do, is a way to boost demand and create then, you know, a pull for greater recovery as well. The trouble is that the minute you make reclaim special, you run into a problem, which is there's lots of ways to make reclaimed refrigerant, one of which is with a label maker, a purple magic marker. And until there is stronger compliance, monitoring, and even maybe enforcement, all of these state initiatives are going to fall well short of expectations. Early returns that's exactly what we're seeing. Shockingly low compliance rates, limited to no enforcement action. As a result, they are not moving the needle. And it really, I think, puts forward, this is presented on a slide, so it looks awfully absolute. I'd put it to you as an argument, which is more law does not necessarily lead to more recovery and certainly more LRM. One of the big reasons is structural. You can keep your eye on a handful of factories that make refrigerant gases. Ports are pretty well monitored. You're obviously not going to be able to police everyone's refrigerator, everyone's air conditioner, and the millions of technicians that service them. One thing I've really liked about the Carbon Containment Lab's approach is that it hasn't been reflexively legal, and instead has tried to look at things like market design and commercial practice. You know, how do you make this, if you can't require it, how do you make this desirable? How do you make this investable? And it sets up LRM, I think, as a very important policy challenge. One of the benefits, though, of not relying on law is that it doesn't matter who won the last election. It doesn't matter who wins the next election. It doesn't matter whether you're in the United States or anywhere else in the world. If you can figure out how to unlock the fundamentals that can drive greater recovery and can sustain supply where it's needed through reclamation or where needed destruction, you can go after gigatons in the immediate term on LRM. So to wrap up, I want to say a quick word about ACTs. Don't want to forget them, and then get out of the way here. But ACTs to me are a nice complement to that, guaranteed upstream constriction in supply. One thing that I think has come up in recent years is that categories have tended to be very broadly defined in refrigerant law and policy. But when you get into niche applications, specialty applications, and other subsectors, you find out that there are some vital functions out there, like electric vehicle charging infrastructure, that can't use any of the current lower GWP substitutes today. There's a lot of technical hurdles. Historically, the transition away from CFCs, HCFCs, and halons under the Montreal Protocol for non-cooling uses has largely been through not in kind. If anyone here is old enough to remember spray-on deodorants, those weren't replaced with other sprays, they were replaced with roll-ons. We haven't seen that kind of transference in the cooling sector, but this ironclad phase down we're under does create markets for these alternative cooling technologies where they might be viable. So in terms of what comes next, legal foundation, very durable. The question now is how does the market execute? And what I really appreciate about this conference, there are plenty of meetings all year round where people stand up and say what everyone else should do. From a policy perspective, certainly from a regulatory perspective, that has its limits. What I really like about this is, there's no internet research that could cough up all the expertise that's assembled here. AI certainly couldn't do it, and I've tried, and you don't even want to know what you get back. This is a chance not to say what people should do, but to talk about what you do, and to really get into, how you can figure out what can scale, what capital will back, and how we can make progress on LRM. So I'm going to stop talking and start listening. Thanks very much.
All right. I just take that off you. Okay. Thank you so much to Stu for the introduction and to Anastasia and Scott for setting the scene. My name is Ethan Olam. I'm a research analyst here with the Carbon Containment Lab, and I'm excited to be sharing some of the highlights from a major report we put out in January entitled Bending the Curve. So with cooling stakeholders facing climate, regulatory, and financial pressures, we at the lab knew that now was the time to look at how those stakeholders could cost-effectively cut their emissions and prepare themselves from the cooling landscape of the coming decade. As I'll discuss, we found a number of actions that can be taken that are both climate and financial wins, and we're thrilled to be sharing them with this audience of changemakers. So what do we mean by commercial real estate? It's a broad bucket that includes offices, retail, hospitals, and more, essentially everything that's not industrial or residential. It's worth noting that we also excluded from this study data centers due to their unique equipment requirements. Air conditioning covers comfort cooling in all these spaces. Refrigeration covers cold storage and retail, but not transport or industrial process cooling. And we looked at both direct emissions, which come from refrigerant gases being leaked or vented, and indirect emissions, the scope 2 emissions from the energy used for cooling equipment. We covered both the US and China from this year out to 2060 and built a robust model to both project business as usual emissions and the impacts of identified abatement opportunities. So these figures show projected cumulative emissions from cooling commercial real estate in billion metric tons CO2 equivalent over the study period. It's broken down into the US, from which we project 2.7 billion metric tons, and China, from which we project 10.1. That is a huge number. For comparison, the entire world emits about 60 billion metric tons CO2 equivalent annually. So there's a huge amount of information underneath these numbers, time series, breakdowns by economic sector, breakdowns by emission type, that I think is very interesting. If you're interested to look at those numbers, I really encourage you to check out the report as well. So we didn't obviously just want to identify that this sector is a major source of emissions. I think we all knew that going into this. We wanted to study solutions. Through a review of existing work and extensive discussions with our network of experts, we created a list of 18 mitigation measures broken down into 4 categories. The first category covers LRM measures, refrigerant recovery, reclamation, destruction. The second covers cooling equipment upgrades, for instance, leakage sensors, improved installation and calibration of equipment, or upgrades to higher performance systems. The third covers cooling demand, including things like higher set points, occupancy sensors, and transitioning from open to closed displays in food retail. And the fourth covers system management, things like smart control systems and improved operator training. With the measures identified, we moved on to modeling their financial and emissions impacts. This is the marginal abatement cost curve for the United States. Each bar represents an abatement measure with its width corresponding to the abatement potential attainable through that measure at less than $100 per ton. The height of the bars corresponds to their financial impact using an internal rate of return of 8%, and the bars are colored according to those 4 categories of measures. A number of very interesting findings show up in this chart. First, just over a gigaton, or about 40% of baseline US emissions, are abatable for less than $100 per ton. Second, a significant amount of that abatement, almost 350 million metric tons, is actually cost-saving to abate. Third, there are a few measures that emerge as very clear no-regret actions. For instance, the 2 large teal bars on the left, which are circled and correspond to intelligent controls and smart maintenance, offer significant savings on both costs and emissions. Additionally, the 2 wide, low brown bars near the center of this figure, which correspond to reclaiming pure and mixed refrigerants, offer significant abatement potential at an average cost below $10 per ton. The cost curve for China is also full of interesting insights. First, 47% of emissions can be abated at less than $100 per ton. That's almost 5 billion tons CO2 equivalent, which for comparison is about the US's annual emissions from the power sector. Second, even more abatement potential appears below the x-axis on this figure, indicating that it's cost saving, reflecting huge possibilities for win-win decisions. Third, it's interesting that the same 2 measures of intelligent controls and smart maintenance, again circled here, are the biggest abatement and cost winners. We didn't want to just look, though, at summary information. In writing this report, it was important to us to include real-world examples of these types of measures being implemented successfully. To that end, we included 3 detailed case studies, each reflecting significant emissions and cost savings from very different types of properties. The first examines an urban mall in China, which unlocked energy savings of 20 to 30% using a series of control and equipment upgrades. The second studied a small supermarket in Ohio, which was able to cut its energy consumption by 80% and its emissions footprint by 90% through upgrades that led to major gains in equipment efficiency and reductions in refrigerant leakage. The third studied a luxury hotel in northern China, which unlocked a 70% reduction in energy costs, with the upgrades paying for themselves in less than 3 years. Beyond cooling-related emissions and costs, there's actually another benefit of many of these measures that we wanted to talk about. Cooling is a huge driver of the growing stress on the American energy grid. Peak load, which is what necessitates grid build-out, tends to occur on the hottest days of summer in most areas of the country. And utilities around the US, in order to meet that demand, are projected to spend over $1 trillion on grid build-out by 2030. But if commercial stakeholders adopted the measures described in this report, we project a reduction of 56 gigawatts in US peak load in 2030. That's an amount that's equivalent to about half of the projected data center build-out over that time frame. So this intersection between cooling and energy systems isn't in the report. It's a new avenue that we're starting to look at, and we're very excited to be exploring it and welcome conversations about this topic. So going into the conference, we'd like to leave you with 4 key takeaways from this report that we believe present a clear case for immediate action. First, as I mentioned before, nearly half of cumulative emissions from this sector can be abated at less than $100 a ton. Second, of those emissions, the majority actually pay for themselves to abate. Third, large properties, which tend to have the scale and the capital to effect significant reductions, can lead the way forward. Finally, with equipment lifetime spanning decades and regulatory changes coming fast, it's very clear to us that the next decade is a critical window for action. If you have any questions about this presentation of the report, please feel free to find me and ask about them. We also have print copies of the report available, and you can download it at the QR code that's up on this slide. I, as well as the entire Carbon Containment Lab team, are very excited for the productive conversations we'll have here about how we can use this information to usher in a new era of sustainable cooling. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I'm excited to bring up the lead author of this study, Willem Vriesendorp, to moderate our industry panel. Get both. I don't need this one. Yeah.
Thank you, Ethan. Maybe one comment on the report. You might wonder why we did China and the US. It was, as you might see, sponsored by LVMH and Hang Lung, which is a Hong Kong real estate company. And they both felt that this was a sector not properly understood by themselves, and therefore there was a keen interest to understand it better. Which is a bridge to our discussion we're going to have right now, which is the industry. So, as we heard from Scott, there's obviously a big challenge, but there is a big challenge in real estate and in cooling emissions in particular, in the fact that it's such a multiple actor industry, right? So you have a long supply chain, and then in the final user, even there you have multiple parties. You have a tenant, you have a building owner, you often have a building operator or manager, which makes implementing actions already very, very hard. On top of that, have we, as Scott also explained very clearly, have we now a migration to lower GWP refrigerants, which adds a dimension to complexity that is very hard to manage. So that's why we're sitting here today with various representatives of the various steps in that chain, who are going to explain to us some of the challenges and some of the experiences they have in managing this migration to lower emissions from cooling. So I'll let each of you do a short introduction to explain where you're from, which company you represent, and maybe your experiences with this migration. John.
I'm starting? Okay. My name's John Hurst. I used to work for Lennox. I retired last Friday. So thank you. How many people here are students? Raise your hand. Are there any students? God bless you. Okay. How many of you wish you were students? Yeah. There you go. Enjoy your time here. So I'm John Hurst. My wife is very happy that I chose to spend my first week away from home, not in her home. But over 18 years with Lennox, I was in marketing and then government affairs. Prior to that, I ran the HVAC program at the Home Depot. Prior to that, I was with the Coca-Cola Company for 11 years. And you might think of Coke as being a beverage company, but they have a lot of assets that are bottle coolers, vending machines. They all use refrigerants. And so I've seen it from an operations standpoint, marketing standpoint, commercialization standpoint, and government affairs. I've also recently, I think Monday, was named the executive director of the Alliance for Responsible Atmospheric Policy. I'll be working with Kevin Fay and looking forward to working with about 50 members who are either users, producers, reclaimers of fluorocarbons. So that's me.
Hi there. I am Samantha Slater with the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute. I'm the Senior Director of Government Affairs there, which means that I have the pleasure of running the policy team at AHRI. For those of you, and there were a lot of students who took off right before the panel started, so I sense that maybe most people left in the room know who AHRI is, but we are the North American Trade Association that represents the HVAC/R and water heating industry. We are a global trade association. Really, we have 7 offices overseas. And it is our pleasure to represent the original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, which you will hear a lot about over the next couple of days. It was also my honor, along with folks that haven't been mentioned yet, Alex Ayers with Hardy, and I know Chuck's been mentioned, but it's worth noting if you have any questions about contractors or technicians, Chuck White knows the answer to absolutely everything. And ask him about his beautiful granddaughter, too. He loves that. But it was our pleasure at AHRI, along with Helen, to work on the passage of the AIM Act and the ratification of the Kigali Amendment. And also worth noting, as Scott Stone did briefly earlier, defending those programs. If we're going back in time in our careers, I spent 15 years working on the renewable fuels industry, and we passed the second renewable fuel standard in 2007. It was a 15-year program, and we spent the next 15 years defending that law every single day. And I think we're going to spend the next 10 years defending the AIM Act and defending the ratification of the Kigali Amendment. I'll stop there.
And I'm Wayne Rosa. I'm the Director of Engineering Strategy for Ahold Delhaize USA. We operate 5 different banners on the East Coast from Maine to Georgia. You may know a lot of these banners, Hannaford Brothers in the Maine area, Stop and Shop here in the local area. In the Philly area, we have the Giant Company. And in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area, we have Giant Foods. And most of my career has been with the Food Lion banner in the Carolinas and Virginia. We operate about a little bit over 2,000 traditional supermarkets. So we're the end user for all the refrigerants. And I've been through, this is my third, I think my third round of going through the refrigerant phase down. So I've had a lot of experience with that.
Thanks. I'm Dane Wand. I'm with Orbia. I am a dad, a husband, and a brother. I'm also the Global Director for Business Development at Orbia. Orbia is about a $7.5 billion international company, publicly traded on the Mexico Stock Exchange. Amongst other activities, we are a global leader in the production of refrigerants, as well as intermediates upstream used to produce refrigerants, and even minerals, raw materials used at the start of the chain. So I'm kind of the other end of the spectrum here from Wayne in terms of what I am representing. In terms of activities related to LRM, so we're globally active. We're the largest HFC quota holder in Europe. The majority of our sales are in the US. We produce and we're active in Asia. We're active in Mexico and LATAM. Specifically in Asia, we are active with LRM, and I'm guessing that's going to be a topic we'll be talking about a bit later.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you for the introductions. So maybe to close off the discussion we were having on regulation, or at least the part that Scott introduced, can any of you, and maybe Samantha is well positioned for that, comment on the most recent changes we've seen, especially in the US, and sort of the changing atmosphere towards regulation and towards climate? Do the interpretation as you like, but I think it's interesting for everybody to hear if you see a recent trend and how the industry reacts to that.
We could talk about that for the next 2 hours, if not 2 days, if not 2 weeks. So I will try my very best to keep it short. And that kind of goes back to the theme of defending it, right? But as Scott pointed out, it doesn't matter who's president. It doesn't matter the administration. There will always be a reason to defend laws such as the AIM Act that are put in place. This administration has made it very clear that they have a deregulatory agenda. And HRI, in addition to caring very much about refrigerant policy, we also work very closely with the Department of Energy on energy efficiency regulations. I think we've seen more deregulatory activity over at the Department of Energy, and I think EPA has really been functioning business as usual, for lack of a better term. Now, was it a surprise that they decided to move forward with a reconsideration rulemaking of the technology transitions rule that was finalized under the Biden administration? Not a huge surprise, right? Was it our first choice? Absolutely not. But, once you're in the middle of it, you might as well go with that. And I think industry, along with all of our partners up and down the distribution chain, as well as our great friends at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and National Association of Manufacturers, lined up very quickly to defend that policy, defended it in comments that we submitted in November, have defended a one national standard, a federal policy in states like New York. And so, that is what we will continue to do. I also think we may have worn out our welcome a little bit at EPA, and I think they're anxious to move on from AIM Act-related regulations. So fingers are crossed that they will issue their final rule, as well as a SNAP 27 final rule, later this summer, and then they can move on and work on different things. And then we can wait to see what happens 3 years from now in November of 2028. So hopefully this will be their last foray into reconsidering AIM Act regulations, but we'll have to see. But I expect the industry to stand up and defend that law and the Kigali Amendment and do what we need to do to keep the federal regulations in place.
Thank you. That's a quite positive message for now, at least. So beyond regulation, what else is incentivizing or causing any of your companies to move towards LRM or to move towards the mitigation, if anything, right? So are there investors or customers or other factors at play here that make you move in that direction or make it easier to move in this direction? You take it, John.
So kind of dovetailing onto Samantha's comments, one of the things industry or publicly traded companies crave is certainty and predictability. And so you might say, well, why did industry support the AIM Act? We wanted the guardrails, we wanted the certainty, we wanted the predictability of a rational, understandable, efficient, cost-effective transition. Because when you don't have certainty and predictability, more cost enters the situation, and then we can't sell to consumers because our products are too expensive. LRM, one of the reasons is just simply it's the law. It hasn't been enforced very well, but it's also the right thing to do. I'm not like Chuck. I don't have a granddaughter yet, someday, but I have kids, and I know that we're leaving a planet to them that may not be as clean as when I was born. In some ways it is, in some ways it's not. So what we can do is we're not the end user, we're the OEM, but there's a lot of education involved. There are some pretty easy things I think that the federal agencies or even state agencies could do to drive better enforcement, better education. There's not enough time here today to go into it, but I think there's a lot that we could do beyond what's being done today, but enforcement would go a long way.
All right, thank you. Wayne, you want to?
Yeah, from a practical perspective for the end user, from an accounting perspective, every leak that we have and we have to purchase other refrigerants to replace it in the systems, that costs money for us. So we've been very active about mitigating leaks through leak detection devices. When we do the phase downs and change refrigerants we reclaim that refrigerant and we bank all of that. And we started banking programs when I started with the organization in 2007. We did it locally for our own individual stores, but now we're in a national banking program so we can share it across all 5 banners.
All right, thank you. You have the possibility to submit questions if you have the code is there. So one more question and then I will see if there's any questions submitted. Perhaps for you, Dane, we discussed this before. It's I think a relevant topic and on many people's mind is the dependence on foreign countries, China in particular. Could you comment perhaps on how you see that and whether or not you see that transition helping to reduce that dependence or maybe increasing that dependence? And in general, how do you see that developing over the next few years?
Yeah, thanks. I think you saw from Scott's presentation his view and the potentially, I guess, somewhat hidden importance of the strategic element here in terms of national security and in terms of all of us having lived through COVID and wanting to own a toilet paper factory ourselves. I think at one point in time, what can happen to supply chains when you're too dependent elsewhere? So if we look at potential opportunities that this type of system has put into place, one of them is clearly to try to strengthen and look at supplying and strengthening local, domestic, Western supply chains. It's clear that that's an opportunity that comes from this, and it's also of real interest, and it's also a risk potentially for those downstream that they're looking at ways to mitigate, and they're asking us for help.
And do you see the LRM as a substantial contribution to that, just from your daily work within your company, or is it perhaps not so significant in this respect?
I think it depends regionally. So if we talk about the United States, I would say for my company, not yet. I think last year you had a presentation from a company that specializes in some of this area. For them, certainly, I think it is. It's an extremely important part of their business and their business plan, and it addresses needs downstream. A quick comment, if I can, we do definitely see regional differences. So if we compare to Asia, where I mentioned, we're actually quite active there in LRM as part of a larger ecosystem that's developed there, where it's mandated for automobiles, white goods, and HVAC equipment, be it comfort cooling or commercial refrigeration, when it's decommissioned, must be recycled, not just refrigerants, all components there, systems in place. And in some of those instances, producers like us are really well positioned to help. One concrete example would just be we have byproducts, and so we have to take care of those in an environmentally appropriate way. So destruction is part of what we typically do. So if we're looking at destruction downstream, getting us involved there can make a lot of sense economically and practically.
Interesting. And that's Japan, I guess.
In that case, it's Japan. Yeah, you know my company well.
Yeah. So do we have any questions from, sorry, Celine? Or?
Yeah, we have a few coming up. I can get this on.
We can hear you.
I can ask you this first. Yeah, I've got a loud voice. Someone has asked about issues with the training and availability of technicians and how that may be a bottleneck in the transition that we're looking to implement.
All right.
I'm going to say absolutely. Two of our banners have in-house service techs. The Food Line and Hannaford banners. The other banners, we outsource all of our service contract. And yes, we're having a difficult time filling open positions, having skilled tradesmen to do remodels and new installations. It is a significant worry for us on the future of refrigeration and having that expertise able to manage the older equipment and the newer technology that's coming out.
I would also note that workforce has been an issue forever, and it will be an issue forever going forward. If I could tell a quick story, because to that point, so last year at our state summit in Albany, New York, I had an opportunity to go with one of my members for a contractor dinner from like 6 to 9. The hook to get contractors and technicians and installers there was obviously dinner and an open bar. And she gave a 2-hour, now this is a Tuesday night. This is a Tuesday night in April. And there were probably 75 contractors in the room. I was sitting at a table with several of them. And the presentation that was being given for 2 hours was probably half the slides that I had put together in a policy related. The point being, I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, what have I done? Because explaining a complex EPA regulation to these poor technicians who gave up their evening to come and listen to this, and it was really that, oh my God, what have I done moment, that I realized the nature of the program that was put in place and how, going forward, these programs need to be simple, easy to understand, easy to implement, and easy for absolutely everybody through the chain that needs to understand them so that they can do their job well. And I share that moment when it comes to workforce, but I'm sure John has.
John, do you want to add to that?
No. I know that this has been a challenge for decades. I could say something snarky if you've read some of the dystopian views of what AI is going to do to us and our job force over the next few years. We should have lots of technicians coming our way. But it is, I think as a society, we did a disservice to push a lot of kids into, you got to go to college. There's the trades still offer great career paths. for a lot of folks, but we haven't cracked the code on getting qualified technicians, or enough of them, I should say. What Samantha said, I want to maybe throw something a little on top of it, that 2-hour dinner. I didn't have the pleasure of going to it. But the connotation isn't that these are simpletons. What they do is very technical, and you can't do it. That's why you got to call them, because you don't know how to do it, or if you tried, you'd hurt yourself. But these folks are very focused on other things. They've got a business to run. Every hour that they're sitting in a boring presentation, like maybe this one right here, is a billable hour to these folks. And so time really, really is money to these folks. And so simple, easy to understand, get in, get out. We need to be very coherent that they're the ones that have to do this, not us. It's real easy for me to sit here and say, it's real easy. I don't have to do it. The folks out there are, and they've got a rough job, and we got to make it easier for them.
Thanks. Is there anything industry can do? So this is about long-term education and making sure the education programs are well run, but is there anything the bigger industry players could do to help this?
Yeah, I think listen, bring them in. We mentioned Chuck, and Alex represents distributors. I can't tell you how many times in my prior careers I was in a room and somebody would say, oh, that would never happen. Some engineer, somebody bright, somebody working in a office building on the 18th floor. Meanwhile, you've got somebody on the phone that says, it's happening right now. Like, it's happening. So I know your theoretical mind says that whatever it is can't happen. You avoid those types of situations when you bring folks in. We used to have a saying in the Army, make the dogs eat the dog food. Not comparing technicians to dogs or regulations to dog food. Maybe I am. But if you bring the folks in that actually have to do it and listen, maybe we wouldn't come up with some of these complex ideas that sound great on paper, but are really hard to implement in reality.
I would add one more thing to that is we need to invest in our future. I know we've done a lot of outreach programs with a lot of the local community colleges, and we worked with our HR department and started like a entrance level tech position that if you graduated from a 2-year college, you could come in, work for us, work under a senior technician and kind of learn the trade through the organization. I know in a lot of positions, a lot of these companies want already trained, skilled technicians to come in and just learn that specific way for that company. But we're going to have to invest in the younger generation.
My members really emphasize that it's not even high school at this point. It's getting to those kids in middle school. And not only the kids, their parents as well, that not everybody needs to go to college. That's not a requirement anymore. And there are good paying jobs that you can take anywhere and own your own business. And this is certainly one of them. But yeah, it is very young where you need to get to those kids these days.
Makes sense. Let's go to the next.
Great. We have a question about the regulatory landscape. So as installation requirements, federal policy, state policy, et cetera, have shifted around A2L refrigerants, around PFAS, the question is about how we can sort of reconcile all of those different requirements and use policy as a driver to move this transition forward rather than as something that can hold it back.
That's a very good question. Again, a subject of its own conference. I guess I would say a couple of things. One transition at a time, right? We're still in the very early stages of this transition, and I'm sure all the folks in this room know there are already conversations about another one going on. And I think that is concerning, almost offensive, I'm going to say, to those of us who are still working so hard to make sure this transition is successful. Because let me just tell you, if this one isn't, there's no way Congress is going to move forward with another one, right? And if it hasn't been made clear already, from industry's perspective, for the certainty that it brings, among other things, we support national standards and programs. We are not interested in a 28, 29, 33 state patchwork. That doesn't work for manufacturers. That does not work for customers. So in order for Congress or another administration to want to move forward with any other refrigerant policy in the future, we need to make sure this transition is successful, right? So I just want to emphasize that. Go ahead.
Producer perspective as well. I think the producers in general, we supported Kigali strongly, similar for the reasons that John brought up earlier. For us, if we're looking at producing a new molecule in modern times, you're talking tens, hundreds of millions of spend for the invest. We need to have the certainty looking forward that it's going to be there 15, 20, 25 years down the road. So all in, we are completely aligned there in terms of the need looking forward. Let's get through this one.
Yeah, I also want to add, Samantha mentioned it, industry has been defending these regulations, like keep them in place. We as an industry have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this new technology and in this transition. And I've always said, the time to decide that you don't want children is when your significant other is 6 months pregnant. And so that's what we said to EPA. Like we've already done the investment. To stop it now, that's all sunk cost. That cost is going to be absorbed by consumers regardless of whether you transition or not. And so for just the pure economic benefit, we want to see this transition go through. The other thing is California, prior to that, the federal government had reporting requirements for Scope 1, Scope 2, and soon to be Scope 3 emissions. We have investors, we have shareholders, we have consumers, we have employees that care about these things. And I think when several companies that I won't mention started to look into this, and it's probably every company, they kind of took a step back and said, wow, we need to do better because it's the right thing to do. And so oftentimes we like to see these things actually happen. You might wonder, why is the industry supporting it? Certainty, predictability, and it's just the right thing to do.
Thank you.
All right, well, we have a lot more questions, but we're going to ask just one more before we wrap up. And this is maybe a nod to our upcoming innovation showcase as well. A question for Dane and Wayne. What kinds of innovations are you specifically looking for to reduce your company's emissions from refrigerants?
So currently we're really invested in different types of leak detection. We do some work with some vendors that do a predictive algorithm that measures the receiver levels so that we can detect a refrigerant leak ahead of just the regular sniffers that you have out there in the field where you detect it, it's already leaked, and you're trying to go back and fix it. So we're trying to be a little bit proactive in that realm. Of course, some of this easy, straightforward things we do with our technicians, never walk into a store without a leak detector. Here are the main parts where you see leaks. Let's go ahead and do visual inspections. So that's where the big focus that we're doing. We are looking at different types of AI that can help, again, be predictive indicators of leaks or be able to tell us what are the commonly leaked parts in age of equipment, type of equipment, even to the manufacturer point. So we're trying to be a little bit more proactive in the leak detection.
From the upstream side, I think looking forward from our side, a lot of effort we're looking at is to try to move beyond GWP. We feel like GWP is today, but our downstream partners need us to be looking further at not only primary emissions, but the total emission packages a number of the previous presentations talked about. So looking from our side to try to look for ways to improve efficiency, looking for other parties involved downstream that are moving towards more localized cooling to try to reduce heat load, to try to reduce these carbon generating activities beyond just looking at the base value of the refrigerant. That's where I think we're seeing a lot of our focus upstream in our R&D, working collaboratively downstream.
Thank you. And this then ends the panel. Thank you very much for your insights. Give an applause to the panel, please. Thank you.
Great. Well, as we mentioned, in between the two panels, we were going to have a special announcement, and always lovely to have the special announcement come from people who graduated from this institution and are now coming back after years of work. Randy, can you come on up? Randy from Google is going to talk about this new initiative and funding announcement that really excited to see. Some of you may have seen it earlier today, but Randy.
Yeah, I realize this may have been a thoroughly spoiled special announcement. So those of you who haven't already read up on it online, Randy Spock, I lead carbon credits and removals for Google. And what I'm really here to tell you is that we and a growing number of other companies care a lot about doing our part to solve the global problem of superpollutants, including HFCs, however and wherever we can. And that today we're putting our money where our mouth is. So under the Superpollutant Action Initiative, 7 companies, Google, Amazon, Salesforce, JP Morgan, Workday, Autodesk, and Figma, there we go, I got them all, will be directing $100 million from now through 2030 toward projects that can pinpoint and eliminate superpollutants around the world. Thanks. So that's part one, like corporations giving money, great, everybody clap, thank you for doing your part there. But I think part two is just as important, which is we do not want to just like throw a dollar figure out there, fund whatever we can and pat ourselves on the back for trying. We genuinely want this funding to be as high leverage as it possibly can be in solving this global problem, in providing, to Scott's memorable phrase, climate relief when we need it most. And to do that, we're going to have to look well beyond our own organizations to the expertise of folks like those in this room and figure out not only what is the nature of the global problem, but where can we be most catalytic in applying some of this fast-moving private finance to channel as much progress and direction from all of the other parts of society that are going to be needed to solve this problem. To do that, we'll need to work with smart people on a roadmap for how to solve the problem of superpollutants, and that's what I believe Anastasia is going to talk about.
So one of the initiatives under this umbrella of the Superpollutant Action Initiatives is to create a roadmap for corporate action, and the Carbon Containment Lab is really excited to lead this effort to create a roadmap. What does that mean? We want to give guidance, we want to showcase really exciting projects, we want to sort of help bring people into the fold of what can be done here. So we're kicking this work off now. And you will hear more about it, and please get in touch if you'd like to get involved. Secondly, Calyx Global, which is a carbon credit ratings company, they're launching a Superpollutant Academy, which is a training program for buyers of carbon credits on what are these superpollutants, what are the projects, where can you find them, how do you evaluate them. And they were not able to be here today, but I said I'd present this for them, and I'm also going to be teaching one of the sessions. And then Zoe.
Guess we'll click.
Oh, no, this
Got the wrong button. Okay, so I think, the third of the trifecta announcement here is we at Affectera are really excited to announce that we're going to be helping the Beyond Alliance and its members launch an RFI, request for information, and an RFP process specifically focusing on how large corporate commercial entities can intentionally invest in reducing their refrigerant emissions through supporting supplier engagement. So really looking at a carbon insetting approach as opposed to a carbon offsetting approach to address superpollutants globally. So for anybody who's going to be here tomorrow, I'll actually be leading a session to dig into the conversation around what carbon insetting is and to hopefully solicit a couple of ideas from the many, many smart individuals in this room to be able to help inform what that RFI process could potentially look like. It's going to be launched at the end of this month, with the entire process concluding around the September-October timeframe. So again, if you're here tomorrow, please come find me. If you're not, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to connect and make sure that you're kept in the loop. Thanks so much.
Okay, now we're going to turn to another panel, and we're going to talk now about capital and financing of different solutions. And then after that, we'll be hearing from the innovators and the innovation showcase. So if the panelists can come on stage and take a seat. Please. Great, so similar format to the last time. So I'm going to ask you all to please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what your investment perspective or buyer perspective, as the case may be, is, and how you interact with some of this sector that we've just heard is under this big transition moment. And how do you see it from an investment perspective? First, Megan.
Hi, my name is Megan Phelan, and I work at Accelerate Ventures. We're an early-stage climate tech venture capital fund based in Boston, and we very much take a thesis-driven approach when we're investing, and one of those theses is in the heating and cooling HVAC space. And so for us, when we're looking at cooling solutions, we are mainly looking in the ACTs realm, but we're also looking at refrigerants. And so for us, I think a few of the areas that we have really pinpointed within refrigerants is, pinpointing that reclamation and recovery. How can we meet some of these phase down requirements as we phase towards lower GWP refrigerants via either reclamation and recovery or conversion into lower GWP refrigerants? That's one of the areas we've really been looking at. Another is via ACTs and either refrigerant-free technologies, alternatives to vapor compression. How can we look at that as an area to improve efficiencies in the cooling space as a whole? And I would say the third area is also passive cooling. What can we do to improve systems that are apart from just active cooling, but reducing the loads? So, a lot of what was said in the last panel of what we need to be doing collectively that really complements all of the technology as a whole, these are the areas that we're looking at. And we do take equity as a venture capitalist, and we are looking at companies that are in the pre-seed or seed stage, so pretty early on. So spitting out of labs, early stage, and we try to be very hands-on with our portfolio companies, so help them figure out those business models, get into the value chain effectively and efficiently, and really be able to prove that climate solutions can also be economically viable. And it's not just a climate play, but it's also an economically viable investment.
Hi, everyone. And first of all, thanks, Anastasia and Dean Takahashi and the whole CCL team for bringing together a really great cross-section of panelists here, but also folks in the room and online as well. I'm Frances Lodge. I am a vice president at Galvanize Climate Solutions on the venture and growth team. Galvanize itself is actually kind of still a relatively new firm. We're about 4.5 years old, multi-asset class, but singularly focused on the climate thematic. And so what that means today is Galvanize actually has a couple different pockets of capital under its umbrella. The first and flagship fund being the team that I sit on, which, as mentioned, is a private markets fund focused on mid-stage venture through growth capital opportunities. But we also have a public markets fund, a real estate private equity fund, and most recently launched a private credit strategy as well. In terms of where I focus, how we define our scope within the venture and growth world is we are investing in companies that are driving material near-term decarbonization. And what that means for us is typically companies that will have a climate impact within the next 10 years or so. And so by nature of that focus, we also, we most typically are investing in companies that are commercial today, so slightly later stage than Megan, or have a very near-term line of sight to being commercial or at that kind of key inflection point. And also by nature of that focus, that has led us to spend a lot of time in the built environment emissions wedge as one of the kind of big sectors of the global economy that we feel like we can make a real dent in within the near term. I will also confess we are big fans of heat pumps at Galvanize. We're investors today in a next-gen mini-split company called Quilt Systems. So if anyone's in the market for a heat pump upgrade, you can check out their website. They also have great marketing. But we spend time across, again, all climate categories. We have spent time looking at a number of plays in the carbon markets, including the ODS destruction project developers, things that touch the methane category, and all of the above.
Great. Well, you all already know me and are probably sick of me by now, but I'll say it again. I lead carbon credits and removals for Google. And maybe I'll elaborate a little bit on what that actually means. So our mission is to compensate for Google's remaining emissions over and above decarbonization of Google and its operations in whatever way most helps the planet solve climate change. So what we're thinking about when we're looking at all of these solutions, I think it's pretty similar to the lens that an investor takes, although we are often a buyer of carbon credits as well as sometimes an investor in projects. What we really think when we're applying that lens is, what does the world need? Like, what does the atmosphere need from us in order to fix it, in order to clean it up and solve climate change? And the journey we've kind of been on over the last few years that our program has existed is in thinking through all of the different chunks of things that the atmosphere needs. So one thing the atmosphere clearly needs is brand new breakthrough technologies that can remove CO2 from the atmosphere and keep it locked up more or less permanently, because that's the only way we're eventually going to solve the problem of excess CO2, which is long-lived in the atmosphere. And so a few years ago, we co-founded an advanced market commitment called Frontier to go after those sort of long-lived carbon removals. Another thing we need to do is use the tools that we already have to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. So that's photosynthesis. That means figuring out how to measure better, how to use plants to basically take CO2 out of the atmosphere. So we co-founded Symbiosis, which is an advanced market commitment in the world of nature-based carbon removal a couple of years ago. And then building up to today, in this moment, it was the question we've been asking ourselves, what are we missing? And the answer was obvious. Like, if you only focus on CO2, you're only focusing on one piece of the climate puzzle. Non-CO2 greenhouse gases have been responsible for a little under half of warming to date. They should probably be more than 0% of the focus of our program. And so in that context, we have started getting into the world of what we call super pollutants that encompasses methane and also HFCs and also other stuff. And we're early in that, as you heard me say. Like, we're looking to the input of experts to guide us, but we've already made sort of initial forays into this world, including an investment in, a purchase from Recoolit, one of the companies represented in the audience today.
Great, thank you all. There's so many themes I could pick up on here. One of them, I think we heard also in the industry panel, is this business imperative matched with a climate imperative. And so for the two investors on the panel, like, how do you weigh that? So do you see carbon markets as a revenue stream that you can rely on right now, or do you sort of risk assess whether that's reliable enough for a company solely to be relying on carbon revenue? And if not, like, what do you look elsewhere for in this sort of refrigerant space?
I'm happy to start there. I would say I think the number one thing that we look for when evaluating something in the carbon markets category is the shape, form, and durability of folks like Randy's demand. That is what we spend all of our time trying to understand, how durable it is, how predictable it is, how many folks are around the table and compelling a market to exist, the types of, value attributes that they care the most about. I would say that is the core kind of catalytic item we need to see to get excited about something in the category.
I would say for us, a technology that is just dependent on carbon credits is much higher risk in our playbook. And to Francis's point, understanding what the volume of those buyers would be is extremely important as we do any analysis. But ultimately, we would very much want to see where else are there revenue streams that are highly durable, and where is the market pushing us? Where are the market drivers, whether that's regulatory or consumer driven, that the market is moving that way regardless. And I think that carbon credits will continue to get more durable, but the timing is unclear and it's hard to make a venture investment without that certainty.
Any reaction to that, Randy?
Yeah, we should talk more. Because I think this is the paradox, right? It's a fascinating field to be paying for pure climate impact. Because to, say the obvious, like, often we are looking for the thing that needs us because it cannot sustain itself in like some other way. Financial additionality is the principle at play. And so what we don't want as a planet is to let that principle come at the expense of progress. What we'd love to do is find ways to top down assert, okay, what are the things that we can be, not the entire like reason for bringing into the world, there should be something. We examine too, what is the sustainability trajectory for like this thing eventually standing on its own 2 feet. But I think more collaboration in figuring out what are the solutions the world needs, where can we be the tipping point for bringing those from not happening to happening, and then all holding hands on, yeah, that is actually the most catalytic thing we can possibly do is a useful area of growth for the field.
Thank you. I'm curious, within refrigerants and what we've been hearing about in the cooling sector, if there are particular areas where you think there's a lot more capital actually needed, whether or not you provide it, because that's not all appropriate for venture, but are there particular kind of areas of technology development or project development or infrastructure that is really crying out for more capital now from your systems kind of study that you've been doing?
Yeah, I would say in my view, and very curious what everyone else from the industry panel would say to this as well, but in my view, a lot of the major corporations are working on lower GWP refrigerants and refrigerant alternatives, and I do think that there is capital there from the industry perspective. We can always be doing more, faster, more effectively, but I think there is capital there. In terms of novel solutions, refrigerant-free technologies and innovation, I think more capital could be put in there to really catalyze that transition.
Do you have any questions on that?
Yeah, I actually think I'm taking maybe a slightly different angle here, but one segment, like I mentioned, that we spend a lot of time in is the broader built environment and looking at kind of different entry points to that emissions wedge. And I do think that we have observed that specifically it was alluded to in the last panel as well, but in the multifamily and C&I space, I do think that can be kind of a challenging breeding ground for new technology, new business models, in part because of that split incentive and stakeholder challenges around, the folks who are benefiting from either efficiency upgrades, better cooling technology, lower energy bills are typically not the ones paying for it. And the thing I always come back to in this category is that putting new stuff in buildings can be very hard, and particularly doing it at scale. And so I think that we are still keenly watching for folks who are innovating, whether it be around business models, solving kind of like upfront CapEx problems, solving go-to-market models, like when you can actually hit those trigger points, whether it be big capital cycle upgrades, tenant turnovers, things of that nature, to actually smooth out and make more efficient the implementation. I think that's a big category that we don't have exposure to today and are continuing to closely track.
one of the big opportunities that my colleague Ethan highlighted as low cost or even negative cost was use of data and analytics, and seeing as we have a great data company on the stage. Are you seeing any interesting data needs here and need for further investment on the tracking of the emissions and or the energy savings side of the cooling transition, either from Google or any of you? Are you looking particularly at data platforms?
Love to hear about any
Okay.
in that regard.
Sorry to put you on the spot. No. Okay, interesting. Might be an area for future, research and looking into what's going on. So I was thinking about financing structures, and then after this we'll go to the question. Are there analogies from other sectors, say from the renewable energy finance world, or say, other areas where they've brought in lots of different types of capital in using different financial structures to, say, build out solar or build out wind power and so on, or even in the electric vehicle space that could actually be applied to refrigerant transition? So any thoughts on things like forward offtakes, group purchasing, rebates, sort of loan guarantees, all of this sort of field of finance? It's not directly what you guys do, but have you ever thought about what could be done and applied to this sector?
I guess maybe to name a tendency that I've seen when finance folks and environmental folks get together, there can be a tendency to focus on the mechanism, what is it? Is it a loan or a bond or and I think not to trivialize that, there are good reasons to have conversations about what's the right shape of a deal to put in place. But often what we can dance around is, well, there simply needs to be a way to pay for something that is the impact of this deal that goes above and beyond the pure financial return of it. And I would argue that's what the renewable energy market is. And the success of that is proof that we can, as a society, come to some sort of set of conventions that can push forward progress towards solving a negative externality through the use of market instruments. And that's not to oversimplify it, what carbon credits seek to be. We're trying, again, to be that tipping point. And when we think about funding deals like Recool It, working with Louis Potok, the CEO of, what would it take to 10x your operations and scale you to other countries? That's where we're starting the conversation, not with, well, here's our standard contract, and let's talk about this because we can only pay upon delivery, or we can only pay for these years. I think all the mechanisms you've mentioned are worthwhile if they're in service of that overall goal of how are we going to make this thing that needs to exist on a much higher scale actually get there.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to, again, a slightly different angle than what Randy was just discussing, but even just back to what I was just discussing in the kind of multifamily and C&I space, I do think, again, solutions that can tackle that upfront CapEx problems in terms of implementing stuff, even, you've seen folks try cooling as a service. There's obviously a huge history of efficiency as a service models, but also you've seen, even in things like methane, folks like the DOE Loan Programs Office step in to actually solve kind of what I would also think of as almost like an implementation problem for some of these new technologies. You see a bunch of climate technologies die in what we call pilot hell, and sometimes what you need is actually a scaled implementation mechanism, which can come in the form of something that solves what is upfront CapEx almost.
Yeah, I think I would add also, we have the carbon credits approach, and we also have the market drivers of the regulations that were talked about in the last panel. So how can we make sure that the AIM Act and the Kigali Amendment the phase down is more than just an opt-in, but actually enforced more? Because the more that we have all players really coming together to hit that 60%, to hit that 30%, that's when the market will continue. And, going to the point of renewables and EVs, So there's the drivers, but then there's also the consumers, and how do we come together and want to transition? And it needs to be that any new technology, whether it's the refrigerant or the system or just whatever it is, the operations, that it's easy. It has to be an easy transition. So the new technology has to either be a drop-in replacement, or if it's something different, the value proposition needs to be strong enough that a consumer really wants it. The reason Tesla's done so well is not because it's an electric vehicle, it's because it's sexy. It's the cool electric vehicle that even though it costs a ton of money, people want to have it as a status symbol. I'm not saying that anyone's going to want the most expensive air conditioner, but how can we make a value proposition that drives consumers to change, as well as having the market drive the transition? So all of those things going together, just like happened with EVs.
I also think there's a really interesting role for standards and building, green building and other recognition programs like LEED and others like that, who give points and recognition and motivation to organizations, especially in the commercial real estate space, to be making those decisions and seeing that they get something back for it, even if it's intangible initially. Over time, they then see the cost savings too. So there's a great role to play there too. So do we have a question? And if you do have a question or a thought to share, please put it through the QR code. And that's for you online people too.
We do. So following up on Scott's discussion earlier of the difficulties of mandating and regulating life cycle refrigerant management, this question is about what LRM activities and LRM startups need to do to be attractive to capital to scale.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would approach this with how we think about not just LRM, but kind of our general investment framework. As I mentioned, we are kind of what a mid-stage venture growth. And so we're typically investing in companies that have a combination of a couple things. One, tech that works. Two, a business model that is sensible and typically proof points on durable unit economics. And three, they're selling into a market that has, durable and robust demand. And so if you can hit those three things, typically that is something that is certainly in our strike zone. If, in my mind, where we've gotten hung up on some things that touch this category, it would probably be in bucket number 3, just in terms of how we think about how rational and durable the demand profile can be.
Yeah, and I would say it just really comes down to what is the revenue pathway to having a profitable business. Is it relying completely on carbon credits, and are there enough carbon credits to really bolster that revenue generation? And what is that going to look like in the next 5-10 years?
We have a question about the role of public funding in this sector, so subsidies and other incentive programs, how those can be targeted, in your view, to help catalyze private investment in the cooling sector.
I'll just mention that there's various green banks in most states at this point, including in Connecticut, and they've done a really great job of taking some of the risk on and really helping build sectors, and then bringing in other sources of capital on top of that. So it's about sort of disaggregating it into different pieces of capital. And have really managed to, many of them, really support whole new sectors. So we're excited for that, for the green banks of the world and the community development financial institutions and others to start looking into this sector, because we think that there's a lot of opportunity here and there's a lot of good that they could do as well. Did you want to add anything on public sources of capital?
I guess just to state the obvious, you can't solve a market failure with public spirited virtuous action. Tragically, altruism doesn't scale. So therefore, there needs to be a role for government in some way to see the problems that are left over after all of the for-profit stuff has had its crack, and find a way to get that on the track, whether it's through regulation or subsidy or whatever other inducement mechanisms can be brought to bear. And I think when we think about how do we have a maximum impact, it's not how do we have a maximum impact assuming that the entire paradigm of climate action remains in voluntary corporate hands. It shouldn't, it can't, in order for this to actually be a field that matters. We think about how can we be the best possible on-ramp to the world fixing this problem, whether through the action we're directly funding, investments we're making, or just partnerships we're unlocking.
Great. I think we're going to wrap up now and turn to our showcase. Are there any final parting thoughts you would like to share before we do that?
I just think there are not many conversations where what is at stake can be measured in 0.x degrees C within the span of a couple decades. And this is one of them. And it's pretty dang exciting to be in the midst of that. So I hope we all feel that weight of, man, we got to fix this. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we better put our heads together.
Yeah. I would say also, we all, hopefully everyone that's in this room knows the GWPs of HFCs. They're in the thousands. It's insane. This is something that needs to be addressed. And to the earlier points, it needs to be addressed now. And from, the private investing point of view, there really aren't that many investors that are really excited about trying to tackle HFCs. And I would love to have every investor get excited about it and have all of the innovators get excited and do something too, and then us match up and actually make it happen. But it's a problem that needs to be happening and fixed sooner than later. So let's all do something.
Right.
Nothing more to add?
Okay, well, thank you so much. So now we're turning to the Innovation Showcase. So this is the portion of the program where we hear the show, don't tell. And I would like to just bring on stage my colleague Celine Goren to introduce this showcase and explain a bit the structure of it, and then we'll hear from the different entrepreneurs.
Thanks, Anastasia. Hello, everyone. I'm Celine Goren from the Carbon Containment Lab. Thank you for joining us for the second year of the Yale Cooling Conference. In addition to those of you in the room, we also have quite an international audience with us today, joining us virtually from 80 countries. And this global makeup of our audience is actually quite fitting, because access to reliable, sustainable cooling is a global need. And cooling innovation is heating up to rise to this monumental challenge around the world. This monumental challenge requires a complete portfolio of solutions, working in tandem to be truly effective. The phase out and phase down of high GWP refrigerants, recovering, reclaiming, and destroying the existing bank of refrigerants, what we call LRM, and accelerated adoption of low or zero GWP refrigerants are all essential tools in our toolkit. And there are also some new cool kids in town. Alternative cooling technologies, or ACTs in short, rethink the fundamental principles of cooling, how cooling is delivered, and leapfrogging the conventional vapor compression cycle to provide refrigerant-free cooling. Incumbent vapor compression technologies that use F-gases as refrigerants are great at what they're designed to do. They provide temporary relief from extreme heat efficiently and cost-effectively as well. But as we've heard many times today, they're also potent superpollutants when released into the atmosphere. We urgently need better alternatives that can deliver climate mitigation and adaptation at the same time. Looking ahead, we at the CC Lab are very excited about the role of innovation, the innovation in the cooling transition. In our definition, innovation extends well beyond breakthrough technologies. It includes optimizing existing solutions to improve efficiency and reduce demand, as well as designing policy frameworks and business models that enable novel cooling solutions to scale more quickly and effectively. Now, without further ado, let's hear directly from the innovators at the frontier of cooling innovation. We're going to batch process this. First, I'll introduce you to 8 leading technology developers supporting and scaling LRM action. These companies design software, hardware, and business solutions that enable better refrigerant management, all the way from inventories and leak detection to end-of-life reclamation and destruction. The floor is now theirs.
All right, thank you. Imagine you're a facility leader responsible for actually driving this emission reduction. So you have hundreds, thousands of locations spread across different regions, service techs, in-house, third-party. Techs change, asset lists go stale. The complexity of this distributed problem compounds. Emission tracking and compliance begin to look more like estimated guesswork than truly proactive management. This leads to asset downtime, compliance risk, and the reluctant acceptance of stubborn fugitive emissions. I'm with FEXA, a facilities operations platform for large multi-site brands. Our TrackRef product serves as the system of record for HVACR assets, refrigerant, and related service history. Our prescriptive workflows enforce best practices that prove outcomes with audit-ready data. So find me later, and we can discuss your refrigerant management goals. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. First of all, just thank you to the CCL Lab for putting on a great event. Super happy to be here, and looking forward to all the engaging conversations coming up. Second of all, a little joke here. Ethan, you put up under $100 per ton of carbon. We can do something. If anyone wants to give me $99 per ton, I can do some pretty crazy things. But I am Adam Shorey with Therm Solutions. I run our origination team. And what Therm does is we stand at the intersection of climate finance and the built environment. And what you're looking at here is a hodgepodge of commercial HVAC equipment. And this isn't future technology. It is infrastructure that is already installed. Cooling and refrigeration systems like these, they operate for 15 to 20 years, and many even longer, much longer. And despite even the great Montreal Protocol, which is an amazing piece of legislation, there is still a high abundance of HCFC R22 systems installed in the US. Globally, even more. And the problem is these systems, they don't emit once. They leak every year that they run. It is this occurring or recurring operational leakage is where most of refrigerant emissions occur, and that is what we are focused on. Globally, we estimate that it is up to over a gigaton of emissions annually. See that catch? You see that catch? Heck yeah! From leaked refrigerants. It's a life cycle issue, and that's how we attack it. It includes recovery, reclamation, and destruction at end of life. But we feel if we're serious about scale, we have to address the emissions from systems that are running right now by encouraging leak detection and repair, as well as the implementation of ultra-low GWP systems such as CO2. We manage these refrigerants across the full life cycle, prioritizing operational elimination, reclaiming what can be reused, and lastly, destroying what cannot. We have already eliminated 2.5 million tons of refrigerant emissions with a pipeline of twice that. And we have done so with our innovative aggregation approach that has brought over 60 unique end users, majority are grocery, but different groups in there as well. And that spans over 2,000 buildings. And we have brought these folks into the VCM and compliance markets, and more are on their way. We feel super strongly that if you want to cut super pollutants quickly and at an infrastructure scale, my God, that's 2 in a row. I encourage you to talk to us more. We will be at table 5, and again, thank you to CCL.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be dropping the phone because I definitely mess it up. But anyway, Hudson Technology is one of the largest reclaimers in the U.S. We've become that way because we've invested multi-million dollars into our plants and into separation technology so that we can be prepared for the transition to the next generation of refrigerants. Thereby, we are able to reclaim the recovered refrigerant to AHRS standards 700, and then we can brand them as our Emerald package branding. In addition to reclamation, we also perform what we call refrigerant or RSOD services, and what that means is that we can go to a facility on site, take the refrigerant out, remove the contaminants, oil, water, moisture, whatever it may be, test it, and then to return it back to the system, and then the system goes back up to original energy efficiency performance. Besides that, we also do what we call Energy Smart, where we can monitor a system from the website from a distance. And we also have chiller technology, where we use a chiller smart system, where we can do predictive and also analytical analysis of the system going forward. In addition to that, we do carbon offset pricing also. We're committed to the circular economy, and we're committed to helping with the phase down and serving in the gap in the phase down to the next generation refrigerants. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Armstrong. I'm the president of AGAS in the Americas. AGAS is a private equity-backed part of TPG Rise Climate, so we have investors excited about HFCs. By the numbers, AGAS is a cylinder management, recovery, reclamation, technician-heavy company. We operate in 24 countries around the world. In the last 10 years, we've recovered nearly 100 million pounds of refrigerants, nearly 120 million tons of CO2e. We do that with nearly 1,100 employees operating in the sector. What we do is build enduring global refrigerant management infrastructures. We set them up and we run them in countries. We're one of the larger reclaimers in the United States. For us, it really doesn't matter what you do with the product, just don't vent it. And the numbers are compelling. In the United States in 2024, the last reported year, 200 million pounds of HFC refrigerant went into the marketplace. 10 million pounds came back. So it's not a 5% recovery rate. 95% of that is going into the atmosphere. It's even worse when you go global. When you go into the global South and Article 5 countries, 99% of the refrigerant is simply unaccounted for. So look forward to seeing you guys tonight, and thanks, Anastasia, for having us.
We are not yet a company, but at the stage of fundamental innovation to translation. Current technologies for destroying refrigerants are high temperature, highly centralized, and very limited in their capacity. As a result, global capacity for destruction is incredibly limited and also unevenly distributed globally. In our lab here at Yale, we are developing an alternative low-temperature technology to enable efficient destruction of HFCs. We couple a low-temperature or cold plasma with a water interface to achieve near-complete conversion to harmless products. And this can provide a versatile, low-temperature and smaller-scale solution. We're currently partnering with the Carbon Containment Lab as well as Yale Planetary Solutions to explore opportunities to commercialize and translate this technology to achieve responsible and sustainable refrigerant management. I'm Leah Winter, and we are excited to have our team connect with all of you.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Dewick. I'm the CEO of Tradewater. Tradewater directly combats climate change by identifying, collecting, and eliminating the release of non-CO2 superpollutants, including refrigerants in old appliances and methane from actively leaking oil and gas wells. We fund this work through high-quality measurable carbon offset projects that produce highly rated, high-integrity, low-risk credits. Every Tradewater credit is backed by rigorous third-party verification and issued by leading registries to ensure maximum integrity, additionality, and accuracy. Our approach turns overlooked emissions into immediate, scalable impact offering fast results-driven path to slow global warming today while complementing long-term carbon mitigation strategies. Since 2012, we've eliminated over 10.6 million tons of CO2 equivalent and are on the path to prevent at least 30 million tons by 2030, similar to removing 7 million gas-powered cars from US roads. To reach this goal, Tradewater has recently partnered with Reclamation Technologies, who are also here today, to establish a go-to provider for closed-loop services, including refrigerant collection, reclamation, and destruction capabilities. Combining both businesses ensures a full commitment to lifecycle refrigerant management and further accelerates high-impact climate action. This is where to learn more. We hope you'll visit us.
Thanks to the lab for putting this great event on. I'm Louis Potok. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Recool-It. We are a platform, an end-to-end platform for sustainable life cycle refrigerant management in emerging markets. So this platform spans digital tools, physical infrastructure and support, as well as financial incentives. What this looks like today is that we operate in Indonesia, which is the world's 4th largest country by population and 6th largest by emissions. It's also a place that is very hot and humid and where use of cooling is growing rapidly. And these kinds of solutions are desperately needed. So we partner with technicians all the way from the grassroots to professional servicing firms. We partner also with facilities owners and operators, shopping malls, hotels across the spectrum. And what we provide is training in sustainable life cycle refrigerant management. We offer access to specialized tools free of charge. And maybe most importantly, we run a buyback program for used refrigerants that would otherwise be vented. We take that gas and we destroy it, and then we sell carbon credits based on those prevented emissions. So every carbon credit that we sell comes with a full digital audit trail. The emissions reductions are measurable and immediate, have a short-term impact. We sell those credits to companies like Google that want to reduce their own sort of total net zero footprint. And yeah, if you either are an HVAC technician in Indonesia or want to buy carbon credits, we'd like to talk to you. I suspect you'll be more of the latter. That's all, yeah, thanks.
This is great. Excuse me, round 2 up here. Anyway, so I want to have all of you imagine just for a moment, just think about how managing your organization's asset data is a little bit like staring at an iceberg. Right above the level, you've got your utility bills, you've got your maintenance logs, and maybe you've got a host of disconnected spreadsheets that kind of look manageable when you look at that in that level. But just beneath the surface, just beneath that waterline, is where that real risk lives. It's the hidden regulatory exposure. It's your aging equipment that's about to trigger a capital shock that you haven't seen in decades. Or it's really just the total cost of ownership that no one can actually see. It's interesting. So as we got up here, the Carbon Disclosure Project actually found that of the 12,000 companies that report their climate data globally, only 11% actually align their capital spending with their climate strategy. That's a big miss. It doesn't mean that the rest of them are all flying blind. It's just that they actually can't see the whole picture to make cost-informed decisions. And that's what we at Vectera are doing to help solve that critical problem. We're looking to help bring all of your asset data to the surface. And the way that we've done that is we've created a proprietary platform that guides an organization through all of its data, helps to identify what those hidden risks are, transforms them into defensible transition plans. And we're not just offering another SaaS platform. We are a service that is backed by software. And the results that we're actually providing, it's not just heightened digital visualization or anything like that. It's actually actionable insights, things that you can act on. Automated risk identification. Where are all of your quick wins? What's a defensible asset level decision that's tailored to your specific portfolio of assets? These are all things that we do grow with you together. And because our platform is built inherently dynamic, if corporate goals, strategies, or anything shift, we can help shift your roadmap with you. So I'm Zoe Dawson with Effectera, looking forward to talking with you all later today.
All right. Well, thank you to all the lifecycle refrigerant management innovators. Now we'll turn our focus to revolutionary ACTs. At the CC Lab, we classify ACTs into 3 main categories: active, passive, and hybrid cooling, with many more subcategories under each. And we also built a database of ACT solutions around the world, with examples for each category. We have 58 companies and counting. You can scan the QR code right here to explore the full database. Now we're going to hear from 9 of the leading innovators in the ACT space.
Thank you very much. So I want you to forget everything you learned about refrigerants, because we don't need them. So at Magnetherm, we have developed a refrigerant-free cooling technology based on metals. They're so-called magnetocaloric materials. So they heat up when you bring it into a magnetic field, and reversibly, they cool down when you take them out of the magnetic field. So we have running systems. This is happening. This is not fantasy. We are launching the systems. We have systems running in the US at Coca-Cola, but also at the University of Maryland, in Japan, in Germany, also in Korea. We tried to bring one actually here, so we got a little bit mix up with the US Customs. So hopefully we get it here tomorrow. But yeah, if don't have a chance, then please reach out to me. You can also purchase it afterwards if you want to. So what you see here is our next platform, which is the Eclipse platform, which is the first professional version, which we are launching now with the leading German retailer Rewe Group, which is a 96 billion euro company. And we had a successful pilot with them showing a 15% higher efficiency compared to a propane system in a still prototype level. And later this year, we are rolling out the first units to actual stores. Last week, we've been to the leading leading event in commercial refrigeration, the Euroshop in Germany, and see a lot of interest from the market. And we will launch soon the next platform, which can then go into high capacity cooling, relevant for HVAC, data center, industrial, and alike. So I'm super glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation. We have a booth outside, so we are looking for investments, partners, but also I would like to open up the discussion how all of us standing here can play a role in the landscape of regulations, because this is what we need. I think we're still underrepresented on that end. So please come up to me or to my co-founder Max with the baseball cap, and very open to discussions. Thank you.
Okay, I know it's 5 p.m. I know you're tired, but I promise you're going to want to pay attention to this one. So, are you ready for the next generation of heating and cooling technology? Because at Pascal, we're creating a whole new type of solid refrigerant technology that provides both heating and cooling for HVAC, refrigeration, data centers, and more, all without harming the planet. And the way we do this is that we've developed a new family of barocaloric solid refrigerants. So these were actually developed at a chemistry lab at Harvard several years ago, and we've now spun that out into a company that essentially eliminates the need for any super polluting gas refrigerants. So we don't need them anymore. And we do this all while delivering safe, highly efficient, and most importantly for this cost-sensitive industry, affordable systems. Our systems are essentially heat pumps that have the potential to be at least 20% more efficient than traditional vapor compression systems. And we're talking 20% better than the best-in-class systems. So when 40% of the world's energy usage is used for heating and cooling, 20% improvement on that makes a big difference to everyone's bottom line. Our materials are safe, future-proof to regulation, and affordable. And that's because our materials components are readily available through existing supply chains. They're also non-toxic, non-flammable, and PFAS-free, not things that can be said about all traditional refrigerants. And they're also available, like I said, at low cost because of the existing supply chain. Our systems themselves that the refrigerants go in operate in the same pressure ranges as traditional HVAC. And that is a big improvement for several reasons. What that means is that because we operate in the same pressure ranges, we can use mostly off-the-shelf parts from the existing HVAC supply chain. So around 80% of our components are off-the-shelf parts that are already costed down and available globally through various suppliers. This allows us to deliver affordable CapEx in addition to the OpEx savings from less electricity usage. And again, this technology is not just a scientific breakthrough, but actually a commercial reality. Earlier this year, we created our first-of-a-kind demo fridge, where we bought a best-in-class Energy Star rated fridge. We pulled off that system, and we put a Pascal system on top, and we even cooled some champagne to celebrate, to prove that our technology works. And we're now at the phase where we're scaling from that prototype phase to pilot demonstrations in the real world this year. So we're looking for many partners. We're excited not just to teach, but also to learn from you all on what's needed to help this highly efficient and affordable technology get to market. So please come find us outside. Thanks.
What a fantastic pool of companies, guys, isn't it? Well, the reality is that the semiconductor industry has changed, has transformed our lives. If we look at lighting, memory, phones, everything has moved to solid state. And our purpose as Mimic is to enable the same transformation for the heating and cooling industry. Rather than using refrigerants, we use semiconductors to move heat. We use electrons that are able to generate a thermal gradient simply by the flow of electricity. And as such, we have no moving parts in our system. We are extremely durable and extremely precise. Now, we were able to overcome the challenges of traditional thermoelectric technologies by bringing in innovations in materials, power electronics, and system design. Our core technology comprises of two parts: a piece of hardware, a modular piece of hardware that delivers heating and cooling, and smart power electronics and controls that enables us to precisely control how much heating and cooling we want to deliver. And depending on how we package those two elements, we can put them in a variety of different markets, from building to automotive, refrigeration, or data centers. We're starting with fulfilling the needs or allowing light commercial building and hospitality to electrify very easily and very effectively. And we have two pilots deployed in Canada, and now we are working on another pilot unit in another pilot project in New York City. The goal for us is to scale up fast and to try to be as aggressive as possible, like all our companies here, to deploy and commercialize. I look forward to talking with you guys.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm from Exogen, and we've been developing solid-state elastocaloric material technology for about 15 years now. And the real differentiator has come for us from taking elastocaloric materials from actuators, which is where they're typically used in robotics, and developing these specifically for heat pump applications working in compression. And that gets around all of the inefficiencies that traditional tension-based systems have. So we've developed our own materials. We've got our own laboratory in Prague. We've got 50 staff overall in the business. And our materials have very low hysteresis. They have very high latent heat, and they survive for tens of millions of cycles in compression. And these are the enabling technologies that we've needed to get our systems where they are. We also have a team in our headquarters in Dublin. We've got another 35 staff in Dublin, and they specialize on the systems engineering side of this, because just having the materials isn't enough, as any of these companies talking about calorics will know. You've got to get that heating and cooling to where the consumer wants it. Systems engineering problems, it's all about thermal. So we have a dedicated team for that, and for the last 10 years, we've been developing those systems up to 60 kilowatts are the largest systems that we've built, and we continue now working our way up through the TRL systems. We've got a booth, and I've got some elasticaloric materials with us if you want to come and see how it actually works in practice. We've been around, say, 15 years. We've got 70 million euro worth of funding in the business, but like all of these companies here, I'm sure we all could do with more. We need more staff, and we need more funding, and that will bring more innovation, which is one of the topics that was talked about earlier. So please come and join us, and we'll talk about elasticalorics. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Max, and I'm with Arctic. A lot of the conversation today has been around stationary cooling, where we focus on the other side of things. So we do same-day, last-mile cold chain transport. So what do we build? We build battery-powered medical coolers that actively cool down to minus 20. That's with no dry ice, no gel packs. And the coolers automatically log temperature, location, and lid opening, which is important for compliance reporting. We sell into medical couriers, mobile phlebotomists, hospitals, and the coolers live with the drivers. They live with the phlebotomists, so they can use them every day. With one push of a button, they get on-demand cooling. Dry ice is the biggest pain point that we hear from those customers. It's difficult to source. It's a literal CO2, and it can be just a literal safety risk in the back of a car if you have the windows rolled up. We don't sell on climate, but we're a climate company at our core. We'll be in the booth area. We'd love to talk to you all. Cheers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna B., CEO of Klima, and a Yale grad, actually, so happy to be back. I started my company with the belief that workers need better cooling. Right now, when they're in the field, their only solutions are ice, sweat wicking, and electrolytes. And that falls apart, because at the end of the day, cooling, more than just being a comfort or safety need, is a productivity need. 65% of all adults in the world who are working are in extreme heat sometimes, and it costs over $1 trillion just in lost labor hours. So we need something better, and that's what we've developed at Klima. We have a all-day wearable that uses active cooling, thermoelectric cooling, that can last a full shift, cool the body 15 to 20 degrees, and restore productivity. Our customers see an ROI typically within 2 days. And it's sensor enabled too, so we get insight into worker safety to have alerts preventing incidents before they happen and understand what's happening from a productivity issue standpoint. And there's real need for it. We've gotten a lot of traction. If anyone wants to talk to me about that, I'll be at booth 2. Yeah, we believe workers need better cooling.
Thank you. My name is Eli Goldstein. I am the CTO of SkyCool. A number of years ago, we discovered a new method of cooling, something magical. It's called passive daytime radiative cooling. Essentially, we can use it to keep any surface that's outside cooler than the ambient air temperature completely passively. What this means is when we apply it to a roof, we can eliminate heat that enters buildings, and we can literally keep buildings cool without electricity. We are doing this with a very, very simple plastic film that is inherently scalable and very cheap. We have deployed our product in over 30 locations. We have a huge pipeline of projects coming up this year. We're working with the nation's largest roofing companies to essentially commercialize this as a roof product that can either go on buildings with HVAC to lower their load or on unconditioned buildings to actually make them much cooler. I'm here with our Chief Commercial Officer, Michael Keating. Love to have you come by our booth and talk about how we are stopping thermal stress and eliminating cooling loads in buildings.
The solar radiation is burning extra diesels and damaging cargoes in trailers, full refrigerated or not. At Chill Skin, we tackled that problem through proactive heat mitigation. Instead of cramping up AC, we stop the solar radiation from turning into heat at the surface. With up to 50 degrees Celsius cooler on roof and up to 23% energy savings, our passive cooling coating Polyfrost can create safer conditions for cargoes, cut energy and maintenance costs, and reduce cooling load and CO2 emissions. Simple, all without extra power. I'm Ewan from Chill Skin. Don't blame the sun, outsmart the heat. Let's build a more resilient and sustainable future. Thank you for listening.
All right. Good afternoon, Sharks. So, my name is Amit. I am the Vice President of the East Coast for a group called Luxwall. What Luxwall does is pretty simple in its execution, but it's a fundamental change in the way we think about buildings. So windows traditionally are the #1 most inefficient parts of building envelopes. And we've accepted that for as long as we've had windows. We started out with single pane glass, then we modernized, put 2 panes in there. We're up to triple. I've seen some quadruples, but really we haven't fundamentally addressed the way heat goes through glass until now. So our company's based out of Michigan. We're scaling up a couple factories, making a product called transparent insulation. Transparent insulation is a window that insulates as well as a solid wall. And it's a product that has a center of glass R18. For architects, they might get what that means, but essentially for the same amount of space as a 8, 10, or 12 millimeter piece of glass, it's providing the same amount of insulation as 6 inches of fiberglass. Our company is scaling, and we're in the stage at which where we've installed across about 150 projects across the country. We have 2 factories in Michigan, and we're made in the USA. Thank you.
As we've seen firsthand today, cooling innovation is no longer confined to the lab. It's already out in the world and ready for its big moment under the sun. And this was just a teaser. There's so much more that these innovators have to share with you than I've given them the time for. So visit the exhibitors in their booth during the Innovation Showcase coming up next. Thank you, and I'll pass it back to Stu for some concluding remarks.
So it's fascinating to get a view on an entire industry and an opportunity that you otherwise would not have seen. You think about what you've just seen in the past 2.5 hours, but a massive economic opportunity that folks have identified in areas and sectors that's a growing environmental challenge. You've got an industry where everybody knows each other's name, and they even know their kids' names, and they've got the depth of relationships and commitment and the long-term commitment to policy and consistency that we need to be able to shape and change the way we can shift things. You've got investors who are looking at this and actually asking for other people to come in to be able to provide more capital and support where this opportunity is seen. You've got corporates who are committed and supporting with real dollars and real time and energy at a global level. How do we make this shift? And you've got clusters of really talented, incredibly bright, and committed folks who are trying to reshape some of the fundamentals of this. And this is all something that you've seen just in the last 2.5 hours. And in the next, 2 hours, please go deep in the relationships and the conversations that are there. Go see and talk with the innovators who we have here, but also go talk to the industry experts who can tell you exactly how refrigerant management works at a supermarket level, and what does it mean, and how are we inspecting these things, and what does it really look like when we get into the 2,000 stores that we need to transform. You've been able to get a picture of what it can look like to transform a complex, interconnected industry. It's almost like, you come into a thing like this and it's It's a Sixth Sense kind of a moment. It's like, I see refrigerants now. Like everywhere in the world, you can see them through the way that, like, we operate, the way we heat and cool our buildings, the way we make sure we have food in our refrigerators, the way we kind of operate as a society, the way we keep each other, safe and healthy. So thank you to the Carbon Containment Lab and the entire team that put this on. A few thank yous before we head out and we have dinner, drinks, and more conversations. The CC Lab team, great collaborators, wonderful folks for showing up and doing the lion's share of the work on the event. They call themselves the cool kids, and they actually are cool kids. Anastasia, Osner, Celine, Ethan, Kira, and Russ, please special shout out and applause for them. This doesn't happen with a wide range of partners, though. CCAC, especially Denise San Valentin, for hosting the webinar and helping to organize and promote the event. 80 countries online. Like that's a sizable group of people tuning in online. So thank you, and particularly for people who are in odd time zones, we really appreciate you tuning in. From Reef, Alicia Khan and team, thank you for your help with programming and promotion. People who I work with, Kathy Hogler, if you see her running around, she's always like trying to help every single person here, and Heather Fitzgerald from the Center for Business and the Environment. Sponsors, the Energy Foundation and Spitzer, the Yale School of Management for hosting, and the excellent AV team that always makes everything work here. We really appreciate you all. Photographer Daniel, who you see around, and you all, the audience. Appreciate you all being here. Really hope you deepen the relationships and conversations around this critical topic. And let's go have some fun talking about refrigerants and cooling, okay?